It was supposed to be a celebration, a milestone, the end of a long journey and the start of something new. My parents' retirement party had been in the works for months. My brother Daniel organized it at the country club they loved. White tablecloths, floral centerpieces, a slideshow of their accomplishments playing on loop. It was everything they'd ever wanted. Recognition and applause, admiration. I showed up 10 minutes early, carrying a small wooden box with a navy ribbon tied around it. My mom spotted me from across the room and gave me that polite, tight-lipped smile she always wore when I did something she couldn't criticize directly, but still didn't approve of. "Jess," she said, kissing the air next to my cheek, "you look artsy." I didn't respond. I just smiled and placed the box carefully on the gift table between a Louis Vuitton tote from Daniel and an envelope from one of my aunts that probably had cruise tickets inside. My dad was laughing at something Daniel said, surrounded by relatives. No one noticed me much. Which, honestly, wasn't new. Let me back up for a second. I'm Jessica Lane. I'm 32. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I work as a freelance interior designer, specializing in restoring older homes into warm, functional spaces. It's not glamorous, but it pays well. And more importantly, I love it. I built a solid career on my own, without a trust fund or a fancy title. But in my family's eyes, that's never been enough. Because I'm not a doctor. I didn't go to Stanford. I didn't publish research papers or save lives. I just build beautiful spaces people feel safe in. Apparently that's not something you toast to. I sat quietly through the speeches, the toasts, the hugs. And when it came time to open gifts, I watched from my seat as my mom picked up the wooden box, read the tag, "From Jessica," and gave a soft chuckle. "Oh, Jess," she said, shaking her head. "Always the minimalist." Everyone laughed. She set the box aside without even opening it, just like they've done with everything else I've ever given. But what they didn't know, what no one there knew, was that inside that box was something far bigger than a gift. It was a message, a decision, and maybe the last thing I'd ever give them. Invisible, since day one. I don't remember when I stopped expecting them to notice me. Maybe it was when I was 5 and Daniel got a new bike for winning his spelling bee, while I got a pat on the head for coloring inside the lines. Maybe it was when I brought home a trophy for regional art excellence, and Dad said, "That's cute, honey, but art's not really a career." Being second best wasn't something I grew into. It was a role I was born into. Daniel was their pride, their prodigy. He was the one who made sacrifices worth praising. When he stayed up late studying, Mom brought him tea. When I stayed up late sketching design boards, she told me to stop wasting time. He became a surgeon. I became an interior designer. He saved lives. I picked curtains. At least that's how they saw it. I worked through college while Daniel had tuition covered. I paid off my student loans while he bought a condo with help from our parents. When I finally launched my own business, they didn't even ask what it was called. And every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering, it was always the same. People would ask about my work, and Mom would jump in with, "She does something with spaces? Like Pinterest stuff." I used to correct her. Then I stopped. It wasn't worth the breath. At this point, I've designed everything from loft apartments to coastal retreats. My name has quietly made its way onto project bids, blog posts, even a podcast episode once. But in my parents' world, I'm the artsy one who never quite figured it out. Sometimes I wondered if they knew how much that stung. Not the lack of praise. I stopped craving that years ago. What hurt was the quiet way they erased me from their version of success. Daniel bought a new car. They sent pictures to the family group chat. I renovated my first solo property. Nothing. Not even a thumbs up. It wasn't hate. It wasn't cruelty. It was worse. It was indifference. That slow, invisible suffocation that comes when the people who raised you look right through you, smiling, nodding, but never really seeing. And I told myself I was fine, that I didn't need their validation. But deep down, some part of me still hoped that one day they'd stop and say, "Jessica, we're proud of you." Spoiler, they never did. A few weeks before the retirement party, we had dinner at my parents' house. Just a quiet Sunday evening. Mom's roast chicken, Dad's usual bottle of red, and Daniel holding court at the head of the table like some crown prince. His wife Lauren laughed at all his jokes. I mostly stayed quiet, like always. The conversation turned casual, then nostalgic. "You know what I'd love when we retire?" Dad said, sipping his wine. "A little house on the coast. Nothing fancy, just something peaceful." Mom's eyes lit up. Yes! Like that cottage we rented in Yachats, remember? That tiny front porch, the lavender bushes, the swing. I could live there forever. Daniel grinned. Well, if I keep getting these bonuses, maybe I'll buy it for you, too. More laughter. From everyone but me. Mom glanced at me, smiling like she'd just remembered I existed. You're still doing that artsy job, right? Graphics or something? I'm a motion designer. I lead visual direction for an indie game studio. She blinked. So, like cartoons? Daniel chuckled. Maybe you can animate them a beach house. That got the table laughing again. I forced a smile. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. What would be the point? But something shifted in me that night. A click. Not anger, not hurt, just clarity. They'd never see me for who I really was. And maybe it was time I stopped trying. That night I went home and pulled out a fresh notebook. Across the first page I wrote, The House Project. It started as an idea, a challenge, a way to turn all the years of being overlooked into something real, something concrete. I cut back expenses, canceled my summer trip, put off buying a new phone. Every spare dollar, every weekend went into the plan. I started combing through listings, coastal towns, small cottages, fixer-uppers with charm and potential, and then I found it. A weathered white cottage just outside Johat's. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and the backyard was a jungle. But the view, God, the view. Ocean for miles, salty air, and yes, a porch swing. It was perfect. I bought it in cash, quietly, no loans, no help, no family. Over the next 8 weeks, I drove there every weekend. I sanded floorboards, patched holes, painted walls. I planted lavender, hung new curtains, scrubbed the kitchen until it sparkled. Aunt Elaine stopped by once with lunch and helped me reupholster the old armchair. She didn't ask many questions, just smiled the whole time like she knew something sacred was happening. When the house was ready, I printed out a letter, added a few photos of the before and after, folded the deed, the keys, and a heartfelt note into a handmade wooden box. I carved the lid with one simple word, peace. It was their dream, wasn't it? The day of the party, I arrived early. Everyone was buzzing around. Catering staff, balloons, slideshow projector. Daniel wore a designer blazer and gave a dramatic toast. People clapped. My parents beamed. I stood off to the side, waiting for the right moment. After dessert, guests started placing gifts on a table. I walked over and added mine, the wooden box, among the wrapped packages. No speech, no spotlight, just the box. A few minutes later, Lauren spotted it. "What's this little one?" she asked, tapping the lid. Daniel walked over and snorted. "Looks handmade. Must be from Rachel." Mom approached and gave a tired smile. Probably one of her craft things. Dad laughed. "We'll open it later." But they didn't. They opened Daniel's gift first. A luxury Mediterranean cruise. The crowd gasped, applauded, posed for pictures. My box sat there untouched. No one asked, no one wondered, no one cared. I stood nearby, drink in hand, pretending to check my phone, pretending I didn't notice. But I did. Everything. Every dismissive glance, every sideways comment, every time someone reached past my gift to admire someone else's. At one point, I overheard Mom whisper, "She always tries too hard. Poor girl." I swallowed hard. Not the kind of hard that burns in your throat. The kind that settles deep in your chest and quietly closes a chapter. That's when I knew. They wouldn't even open it. Not because they didn't have time, not because they forgot, but because it came from me. And that was enough for them to assume it wasn't worth opening. So I waited until the crowd thinned out. Then I walked over, picked up the box, and left. No one stopped me. No one noticed. I drove straight to the cottage, the one they never got to see. That night I sat on the porch swing with the box in my lap, opened it slowly, read the letter I had written them, held the keys in my hand, and smiled. They didn't reject the house. They rejected me, and that somehow made everything perfectly clear. The house wasn't a gift for them. It was a gift for the version of me that spent years trying to earn their love. And now, I finally knew, love that must be earned isn't love worth keeping. So I stayed, in the house by the sea, where peace wasn't just carved on the box. It was real, and it was mine. That night, Jessica didn't cry. She returned to her hotel room, pulled off her heels, and sat in the silence. There was no dramatic breakdown, no storm of emotions, just a cold, clear realization. Her parents hadn't just rejected her gift. They had rejected her again. She stared at her laptop for a long time, then opened it, logged into the online platform where she managed the deed and ownership of the house. A few clicks, a short legal form, one confirmation. The beachfront house, the one she had envisioned for them, restored with her own hands, dreamed would finally make them proud, was no longer in their name. She transferred full ownership to Aunt Elaine and Uncle Jeffrey, the only two people in the entire family who had ever made her feel seen, loved. Enough. No fanfare, no announcement, just quiet power. She shut the laptop and slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Jessica returned to the retirement party venue. Most of the decorations were gone, chairs stacked, floors swept. The only thing left was the long gift table pushed to the side, now mostly empty. She walked over and carefully placed something down, a simple envelope handwritten with her parents' names on the front. Inside was a copy of the letter she had originally placed inside the wooden box. But this time she had added one more line at the bottom. A small handwritten note. Sometimes the simplest box holds the biggest gift, but not everyone has the patience or the heart to open it. She tucked the envelope under the stack of leftover thank you cards and left without a word. There was no need for confrontation, no need to explain. She had already said what she needed to, just not in a language they were willing to hear. A week passed. Jessica had returned to her usual life. Mornings with coffee and coastal air. Afternoons working remotely from the cottage's sunlit porch. Nights with books and peace. Then her phone rang. Mom. She let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later it rang again. This time it was Daniel. She picked up. "Hey, Jess," he started, voice unusually awkward. Mom was talking to Aunt Elaine and heard something about a beach house? She's been asking if that was your gift." Jessica didn't miss a beat. "It was." Daniel hesitated. "Why didn't you tell them? I mean, they didn't know." "I did tell them," she cut in, calm. "I just didn't yell it. They assumed it wasn't worth opening." There was silence. Then she added, gently but firmly, "Tell Mom it was the gift she never opened." And hung up. The next day, a message from her mother arrived in her inbox. "Jessica, we're so sorry. We had no idea. We thought it was just another one of your creative gestures. Please, can we talk?" Jessica read it once, then archived it. She didn't respond. Later that week, over tea, she shared the story with Elaine and Jeffrey, how she had dreamed of finally giving her parents something they couldn't ignore, something too big to dismiss, and how they still found a way to overlook it. Jeffrey shook his head. "You gave them a chance to see you. They chose not to look." Elaine smiled softly. "But we did. We always have." That night, the three of them sat on the porch swing of the cottage, now legally theirs, watching the waves roll in. The scent of lavender drifted from the garden, laughter carried in the wind. Jessica looked out at the horizon and whispered mostly to herself, "They missed the gift. They missed me, and I'm done reminding them what they lost." It took Jessica a while to understand the full weight of what had happened, not just the rejection of a gift, but the quiet confirmation of something she had spent her whole life trying to deny. Her parents were never going to see her. Not really. But strangely, that realization didn't crush her. It set her free. Back at the beach cottage, Jessica didn't mourn the relationship she wished she had. She lit a candle on the windowsill, made herself a warm cup of tea, and curled up with a journal she hadn't touched in years. The ocean roared outside like a gentle reminder. There was still life ahead, and it was hers now, fully. She decided she wasn't going to fight for a place in a family that didn't want to understand her. She wasn't angry, just done. That week she transferred the deed of the house permanently to Aunt Elaine and Uncle Jeffrey. They cried when she told them. Jessica just smiled and said, "It always belonged to people who knew how to value a good story." The cottage became their shared retreat. On weekends, the three of them would drink wine on the porch and laugh about old family tales, the funny ones, the sad ones, even the awkward ones. No one pretended things had been perfect, but at least now, things were honest. Jessica returned to writing. What started as a journal entry became a blog post, and then another, then a series. She titled the blog "The Gift They Never Opened." A quiet nod to the box her parents had dismissed, and to every metaphorical gift she had offered them over the years, her time, her attention, her effort. In her writing, she poured out the years of being compared to her brother, the times her accomplishments were downplayed, the subtle digs at her creative career, the way love from her parents always seemed to come with conditions she could never quite meet. She didn't write with bitterness, just clarity, and people resonated with it. Readers began flooding the comment sections. Messages came in from strangers who said they'd always felt like the invisible one in their family. Some cried, some raged, some just said, "You made me feel seen." One comment stuck with her. "I realize today I've been trying to burn my mother's love for 42 years. Maybe I need to stop burning and start living. Thank you." That night, Jessica stood barefoot on the sand and watched the tide come in. For the first time in her life, she wasn't planning a way to prove herself. She wasn't waiting for someone to apologize. She wasn't writing a speech or rehearsing a defense. She was just breathing, and it felt like freedom. Her parents never called again about the house. Daniel sent a generic holiday card. She didn't respond, not out of anger, but because some silences are more powerful than any confrontation. She didn't need to explain herself anymore. Not to them. She gave her time to people who valued her presence. She gave her creativity to strangers who were hungry for honesty. She gave her love to herself, for the first time, truly. Sometimes she wondered if her parents ever talked about that box, if they regretted not opening it. But then she'd remind herself, it wasn't about the box. It was never about the house. It was about the blindness people choose when they refuse to see beyond their own expectations. They missed the gift. They missed her. And she had stopped asking them to notice. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones the least capable of loving us back in the way we need. You can give your heart, your time, your best intentions, and still be met with silence. But that doesn't make your gift any less valuable. The key isn't to wrap it better next time. The key is to offer it to someone who's willing to open it. And most importantly, never forget to open your own. Have you ever given your heart to someone who never bothered to open it? How did you find your way back to yourself?